All right. Well, thank you guys again for your patience. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessica Chance. I'm with the Emerson College Career Development Center. And I know that this is a topic that comes up quite a bit for a lot of students, even alumni. This is something that you're going to get used to doing more often throughout the course of your career. So what you see here is just a set of slides that we provided for students. I'll also mention that this is something that's on EC20 Career Launch for graduate students. And so you'll be able to access this later on and just review for reference. So, and what I'll do is I'll probably go for about a half hour, 40 or so minutes, and then leave some time for questions. Okay, so salary negotiation. Let me just look over my notes here. So one of the things that I want to sort of get across is there's two things essentially, is that you are thinking about the art of the conversation and how to establish a rapport with the hiring manager, with your boss, as far as understanding how to find a mutual benefit between the two of you. And also you're doing a lot of research, and we definitely provide some resources for you guys to look through to start doing that research. But a couple of things that I just want to bring to the surface here that a lot of people are talking about already, that's become much more well-known, is pay equity. And so a couple of notes to women in particular, and I respect that, salary negotiation is a topic that all people are trying to, factor in terms of their career development, their financial sustainability, their financial planning, meeting their goals. But at the same time, it's important to know some statistics in terms of equal pay. And so this photo came from an organization called Boston Women with Purpose that just gives a good sense of, by gender and also by race, the different levels of pay. And I want to bring this point home because you want to think about the futuristic viewpoint for everybody and their earning potential throughout their career, and the importance early on in your career to be able to establish what to say and how to say it, so that by the end of your career, you've made a certain amount of money, aside from the fact that you want to be comfortable with what your income is. I think a quote that really drives it home is right here, about the pay scale and the long-term impact of starting at a lower price point. And so again, I say this to men and women, but also thinking about for women in particular, because this type of conversation might bring up a different kind of anxiety, a different set of concerns in terms of, how we as women are conditioned. I think it's important to think about how this topic impacts you, individually. And so just wanted to keep that in mind. Some great quotes here that I think will really drive home the point that we're trying to make about salary negotiation. So some myths that I think are important to really dispel about what salary negotiation is and what it is not, is understanding as much as possible the big picture of the compensation. A lot of times when we think about the negotiation process, whether you are a job seeker and you're in the middle of an interview and the topic of salary has come up, or if you're currently employed and thinking about asking for a raise, it's not just looking at the dollars. It's not just looking at the numbers. It's looking at, in total, what is your employer offering you? What are you getting in terms of, all of the benefits of working for a certain employer? So it's looking at that. It's also knowing your worth. It's really important, and I would suggest doing this starting now, over the summer, into the fall, during the duration of your career. I would say every, once or twice a year, to really take stock of what you've learned, what experiences you've had outside of your level of education, the technical skills you've developed, the soft skills that you've developed, any other professional development opportunities, and different things that you bring to the table. Because the more you understand your worth, the more you understand the value of what you bring, then you're in a much better position to talk about why you're asking for a certain dollar amount, why you're asking for a certain range. So when you are concerned about what to say and how to say it, know that this background preparation is a big part of that preparation. So understanding the art of the conversation, when we talk about this, a lot of it is how you go into it. What's your mindset? So when you're talking about salary negotiation, it's not about anything that's antagonistic. You're not being demanding. You're not being unrealistic. You are finding that mutual benefit. You're also expressing gratitude for the opportunity to not only be interviewed, but also the opportunity that you've gotten to the stage where they're asking about salary, because that means they really want you. So that's an important thing to really keep in mind. You're developing the confidence to have the conversation. And I think a lot of what we're talking about today is going to help you develop that confidence. There are a set of do's and don'ts. There are ways that you're going to look at this and sort of take these slides to, learn about what you're doing in the process, but you're also going to develop your own style. Everybody, all of you, I don't assume, are going into the same industry looking for the same jobs, interviewing for, the same positions. And so you're going to, through your research and more of that self-awareness, develop your style about how you're going to do this. Practice is a huge piece. That's one of the things that I'll probably repeat a few times in this, is really the importance of practicing, as much as possible, having this conversation in mock interviews, mock salary negotiation scenarios. I'm always more than happy to offer those. And then the other part is being comfortable and satisfied with how you're being compensated. So when all else fails, you're feeling a little bit anxious, you want some more practice, think about the first time, I receive my paycheck, when I look at my benefits, knowing that you feel comfortable that you negotiated, for what you're worth, because that's going to be a big, important part of this process. So be comfortable and be satisfied with how you're being compensated. Again, starting at a good point so that going forward, you can only go up in terms of your earning potential. Okay. So something that salary is not about, and I think this is when it gets into some of the resistance that people have in practicing this, some of the anxiety that, always comes up, and well, how do I do it? What's my approach? And sometimes the background thinking, or what goes on, is this idea that you are negative, you're being negative, or you're asking for too much, or they're not going to like you, or they think that you're too demanding. And it's not about that. Your approach isn't going to come from that direction anyway. One thing I always recommend is, starting with that gratitude for the opportunity, and then being able to back up your worth and being very comfortable with owning that. And so those are, again, some really important things to keep in mind. You don't want to be in the mindset of like, well, I'm just going to take anything. You don't want to just take what's offered. You want to, really educate yourself and be able to thoroughly look at the salary as well as the benefits package. You want to take a look at that and have some questions and better understand it during that interview process instead of after you're hired. Not concerned about rejection. It's better to be in a situation where maybe, it's not a mutual benefit, or maybe it's not exactly the salary that you were looking for. And they might bring up some things about their budget, or what they're able to do, or what they're not able to do. But don't let that fear of rejection, or them saying, no, or not sure, or not quite. There's a lot of answers that employers give, but don't let that stop you from asking for what you're worth. Again, worrying about concerns or feelings or opinions about you. Again, your approach to this is going to be positive. It's going to be professional. It will be measured. It will be backed up with research. So all of those things should sort of mitigate that concern for, how you might be perceived. And you do not have to start the conversation early in the process. Usually the employer is the one that will get to that stage, usually in the second interview when they're strongly considering you. However, prior to when that conversation opens up, that's when you want to be doing your research. And like I said, we have some resources that we provide that will help you do that research. Okay, so a couple of things here that I just want all of you to keep in mind, and this is both for folks that are currently looking for work, that are getting ready for interviews, that maybe have some interviews lined up already. I've been meeting with some students and alum who are on some job and internship interviews, which is awesome, and that tells us that there are still people hiring, so that's a plus. But this is also for people that are considering a raise, and so something that I just want to share in light of the pandemic and COVID-19 and what I'm sure is a lot of news you guys are seeing about who's hiring, where the hiring freezes are, how businesses are impacted financially. You do want to think about timing. So I would say that the advice I'm giving you guys today overall about salary negotiation, you can use, throughout your career, you can reference this. At this particular time, the timing piece is important. There's a lot of great folks out there that are worth following, that provide a lot of helpful information about, not only what to say, how to say it, but in particular right now with COVID-19, what to address and how to think about this. And so a quote here, a woman named Elaine Varellis, who contributes a lot to Boston.com, shared some helpful information for people that are in high-risk jobs, for people that are working in an organization and thinking about, raises. This may not always be the best time. Right now may be tough. And so, like I said, if there's hiring freezes, sometimes there's freezes within budgets. And so right now, I would be very cognizant of what your employer currently, like I said, for those working right now that are thinking about raises, think about what's going on with your organization before having that conversation. I'm well aware that a lot of Emerson folks aren't necessarily working in healthcare. However, this is applicable for some of you out there that may be in healthcare or know other folks who are, that might be in a better bargaining position because of additional responsibilities and how I'm sure those jobs have changed because of COVID-19. But again, this is just important to keep in mind, just so that you're not tone deaf, when you're starting that conversation and inquiring about salary. So again, and other questions that come up, feel free to write those down and we can talk about them a little bit later. Okay, so the next piece here is really, again, how you're thinking about this. And so you're at a great stage. At this point, you're at a really great stage because you are having a conversation with the potential employer about salary. So obviously that means they're strongly considering you. They put in the time to schedule interviews, to have you come back, to ask questions, that they put in the time. And so you have to think, that's a lot for the employer to be doing. And so would they really want to have to go back and start all over again? So they're right at this point. And so you have to think about the fact that that gives you leverage. You're in a position where, hey, they're at this stage. Let's see how, I can move this conversation forward and remind them of what I'm worth. So again, this is all positive. There's also the expectation that you are going to negotiate. It's not going to come as a surprise to any employer if you are saying, this is a salary range that I'm looking for. Can we talk about this in terms of the full compensation package? Or phrases like, this is the range that I'd like to discuss with you with my experience and, my interview and more that you've learned about me. This is my expectation for compensation. So those are just two examples of how to bring up that conversation, but it's not going to be a surprise. And so employers expect that they will have to negotiate. So again, you're not out of the ordinary at all for doing this. And so just to normalize this process. This comes from a book, this quote that you're reading right now, the book, Get Paid What You're Worth. So again, that's another recommended resource that's really helpful. Okay. So a few things, you want to remember what's going on the other side of the table. It's important to think it's not just about you and assessing everything, but they're sort of looking at how you go about this process. And so they want to know that you're confident, that you're self-aware, that you have something to bring to the table, and that you're able to articulate that so that you can really back up why you're worth a certain number. And so when they're able to really get that from you, that leaves a very positive mark on the experience. And so they're looking to be reminded about how do your skills fit into their departmental goals, and reminding them about the key things they saw on your resume and what they saw on your cover letter and why they're bringing you in, to begin with. And so then also seeing, again, what you bring, sort of that inventory, taking stock, what I'd mentioned before. And then the third piece is the self-awareness and the curiosity. So a really important point that we bring across with interviews is have questions. Always be curious, be ready to learn more, show them that you want to know as much as possible, to be ready for the job should they hire you, and be ready for those first 90 days. All of those things are really important. That curiosity, that, inquiry is really important. And it shows that you take initiative, and that you're doing your research also. And so those are the things that they're going to be looking for when they're in that conversation with you. Before, during the interview, that'll be really important. So. Okay, to sort of back up some more of that, these are some quotes that really drive home that point. So, I believe in people who believe in themselves. They want to invest, and that person's willing to invest in getting or keeping them. It's also essential to understand compensation. If it's not money, what other currency options are available? Again, what I was saying, are there continuing education opportunities? Professional development. Obviously, what is the healthcare, the dental, flexible time, your schedule, personal time, vacation time. This is all the big picture. You have to think, what do I want my work life to be? What are the things that I need to have in place? And the more questions you can ask about that, the employer knows that you're not just thinking about the salary piece. So I also take note of candidates who ask questions, because then it feels like a collaborative effort to reach a mutually beneficial outcome. So again, it's about the mutual benefit. It's not about this is what I want, that's it. It's about this is what I want. How can we discuss this moving forward so that we both find a number that we're comfortable with? Again, that's the mindset that you want to go into. And again, mentioning the names of these folks who are sharing, who shared these quotes, I think it's again helpful to read up on the resources that we provide, just to give you some more information to work with. Okay, so whoops, sorry about that. So 6 things, your value. So this is good organized thinking for any of you that are feeling a little bit overwhelmed, if you're feeling stuck, if you're not sure what things to take in consideration when you're looking at the salary ranges, these are some great places to start. Where have you worked? And it's not just things related to your academic program at Emerson. It can also be things outside of the career changes that you've made, previous jobs, current jobs. All of them give you different sets of skills that are directly related and also transferable to what you want to do in your work. All added value, all benefits, all things that you're bringing to the position you're applying for. Skill level, industry knowledge, how long have you been in the field, how long you've been working in certain positions, how much you know about it, the trends, publications, professional associations, how plugged in are you in this work, and how long have you been a part of this field is also very important to keep in mind, along with the level of education, the specific skills that you bring, and who you're affiliated with. All of these things are important and what the employer is going to be looking for when they're thinking about, okay, is this person worth what they're asking for? So keep this list in mind. And like I said, every few months or, a few times a year, add to this, keep track of it, because this can only help you now and in the future. Okay, so some red flags. So these are things that tie into what a lot of people tend to be worried about as far as how they're coming off. And you want to see what would be a concern of the manager. So, once you're talking about salary and they're sharing information about compensation, about benefits, about salary, if you say yes to everything, if you aren't exactly sure why you're asking for a certain salary range, or if you're too pushy or aggressive and don't seem open to asking questions or having a further dialogue, or you don't have any questions, then those are all concerns for the employer, because they're thinking, well, outside of the discussion about salary, how is this person going to be in meetings, in team projects, when they're advocating for themselves or someone else, or they have an idea, or when they want to collaborate, or when they want to strategize? Keep in mind that the approach that you take to this conversation, what you say, how you say it, the research and the mindset that you have going into this is a reflection of who you're going to be on the job. Now, is that the case every single time, right down to every single aspect of the salary conversation? No, but you have to understand that the employer is working with everything they have, with whatever they have possible. And so these are just things to keep in mind, that if this is the approach that you're taking, in either of these directions, then they might wonder what you would be like to work with. And so again, keep that in mind, that this is about salary, but this is about that bigger picture, i.e., who you would be as an employee. So something else that you want to think about in terms of this process is you are interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And so it's going to be really important when you're in the position of negotiating for your salary, what are the other things about that employer that fit your criteria? You might have a job that pays extremely well, but there might be so many other things that don't quite fit for you and what you want, that it might be problematic or challenging in the future. So again, the big picture. How is the company doing? What does the leadership look like? What's the company culture? Professional development opportunities, are they available? And again, that benefits package. So I know that I've repeated myself a few times in terms of, some lists of things to really keep in mind, but it's very easy to forget all of these things, again, when you're thinking about the salary conversation and really practicing that. Do not forget these important points to really keep in mind when you're looking at a job that you're going to be spending a lot of time with, people that you're going to be spending a lot of time with in a field that Emerson has prepared you to enter. And so remember, if not anything else, to look at the big picture. Okay, so making a connection. So they might share with you in a letter, maybe in an email, or just have the conversation with you over Zoom like this, or, other forms of, video chatting online about salary. What are you looking for? Let's talk about this. This is what we offer. How do you feel about this? So those are just different variations of how the conversation can come up. So your job is to set a positive tone. Think about the different conversations that you've had with a faculty member, peer, a colleague, a staff member, where some sort of negotiation took place. What was it like? When it was a positive outcome, what made it positive? Think about all the different negotiations and the forms of communication that you have with people every day, and what makes the outcome a positive one. And so you want to go into this thinking about a partnership, a collaboration. You know, think about those times when you have done something collaborative with the project where there is that give and take. And the reason I'm stressing this is because the more you can think about it this way, the less you think about, well, I'm asking for this and they can't, and there's this back and forth sort of ping pong match. It's not a debate. Again, it's a conversation, it's a collaboration, it's a way to say, we're here, we got this far, I'm thankful, let's find something that's going to make us both happy. And so those are, you know, really the 5 things when you're making a connection with the employer to keep in mind. Okay, so the offer. Here's another list for you, some other things to keep in mind. So what's in your budget? You know, so what do you need to have in order to be comfortable day to day? The city you live in, you know, if you have people to take care of, the cost of transportation, you know, food, all of those things that we all know about. But you have to know in order for, you know, in order for me, you, anyone, any of us to live comfortably, there's a salary that we have to have. And so you have to think about what's the lowest that I'm willing to go in order to like stay as comfortable as possible. So that's going to really help you identify that range. You know, other things as far as the compensation, additional compensation, depending on your hours, if you're working overtime, again, the insurance piece, you know, the retirement benefits, other perks that come from different employers, and again, continuing education and tuition reimbursement. You know, all about that, you know, so again, these are things that it's okay to ask questions. It's good to have questions. This is all information that you're getting to help you make the best decision possible. And the 4th, of course, remember, this is your passion. You're going into what you love. I'm sure a number of you out there, I know I've met with journalism students, publishing, theater education, a range of folks in the Emerson graduate programs. It's your passion, but there is a business to this. And this is sometimes the introduction into having the discussion of the business that is your work, that is your career. And so, so again, like anything, like I say, this is all about that practice. So here's a couple of screenshots. You know, if those of you out there are sort of thinking, okay, well, where do I start to go? You know, some of these places you might have already heard of. So there's Pay Scale, and this is just giving you a sense of like, you know, what it looks like, how it's laid out. They all have sort of a different layout and different feel to how you're putting in information to get a salary estimate, a salary range. Like right here, they offer get a free salary report to answer the question of what am I worth? So Pay Scale is a good site for that. There is also salary.com that's been around for a while. That's a good one. Indeed is another good site. There is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and they offer really helpful information as far as what employers, what sort of industries pay what, and a lot of other criteria. So something to really drive home with this is the value of knowing all these different areas. So when I say areas, again, where you live, how many years of experience you've had in the field, your level of education, other internship experiences that you've had, your ability to use technology. I know for some of you out there, that's you know, high priority than in other fields. And then your soft skills, your ability to work with people, to actively listen, to collaborate, to lead. And so all of those things are going to be important pieces of information to put into sites like salary.com, like Pay Scale, like NACE, National Association of Colleges and Employers, that will give you some numbers to work with. Important point to keep in mind, always use more than one resource. You're going to see variations in terms of the numbers, but you'll start to sort of see some themes in terms of the ranges per industry, per location, per level of experience. But it's never good to use just one. So we do recommend using 2 to 3 to get some general ideas of what you're working with. Okay, so this part here is a little bit more about that dialogue. And so in terms of that dialogue that you're having with the employer, this does not mean that you're memorizing a script. It does not mean that you're being quizzed in any way. But going back to what I said earlier, there is an art to the conversation. There is a way that you want to approach it. Again, it's collaborative, it's positive. It's an opportunity to remind them of your worth. And so these are all important things to keep in mind when you're thinking, what do I say? And how do I approach this? In the end, your goal is to lower barriers and reduce defensiveness, not about being defensive, all about sharing, all about the mutual benefit. And so these are just a few examples of how these conversations come through when you are giving them a number, when you're giving them a range. It's not unusual to get some resistance. It's not unusual for employers to say, I have to take a look at our budget and see if that's realistic. It's not unusual for employers to say, well, this is a standard amount that folks tend to get paid when they begin. These are all things that come up. But like I said earlier, this is not a conversation that employers shy away from, or it's not a surprise to them when it comes up and when you offer something and, there is that conversation about, well, what's going to work? And so you have to be ready for that. Don't be surprised, be ready for that. It's not negative. It's about them having to keep you attracted. They want to keep you in the position. Remember, you got this far. That's important. So they want to make you happy, but they also have to look at their numbers as well. And so these are variations. These are examples of how some of those responses come through. And so in return, these are some examples of what you can say. And so let me just get some of these weird pop-ups off my screen. Okay, so these are not in any way things that you would have to say. Or things that, again, it's not a script to memorize. It's not dialogue to memorize. However, you can take some of these and use them for yourself. Think about some of the themes that are being brought up here. So can we talk more about benefits? Looking at my options. I'd like some time to think this over. Never feel rushed into saying, yes, sure, I'll take that. Give yourself some time. Again, sometimes you want to do some additional research. Sometimes you want to ask some more questions about the benefits package. That's okay. That's to be expected. It's also important to, take some time to review and to say to them, you want to look at the best number that meets your skills and your abilities. And so again, these are just some suggestions of how you can have this conversation, ways to respond. And then it usually leads to some very good dialogue. And it leads you to opportunities where, again, you can say, I'm bringing this, this, and this to this position. So again, let's find something that will make me happy and you happy. So again, some examples. And like I was saying, it's a perfect opportunity to think about what you do want to say and practice it. Again, practicing, I'm always more than willing to do role play, with students and alumni. So just let me know and you can always request an appointment to do that. Okay, so some important things to remember. Claiming your value requires that we exchange value. Again, the book I mentioned earlier, Get Paid What You're Worth. The employer wants to keep as much as possible in their budget, and the candidate wants to claim as much as they're worth. So again, that mutuality. Both sides can get what they want. And so again, this is a very positive opportunity. Remember, you've gotten to this stage. And so let that fuel this conversation in a way that empowers you. And again, gets you comfortable, with where you are and how you can move up financially throughout your career. That's what you want to be comfortable with. There are some additional resources here. The books that I mentioned, where some of the quotes are, and then the websites that I mentioned. A couple of others, LinkedIn Salary. So I would say within, I don't know, I think maybe about the last 8 or so years I've been on LinkedIn. They provide many more helpful resources, and one of them is on salary. So take advantage of the LinkedIn Salary tool. The Muse is a great website that also has very helpful articles on salary, mystifying the process. And the organization AAUW, some of you out there might be familiar with, it stands for American, I think, Association of University Women. And so they focus a lot on pay equity and professional development topics specifically for women. And so, so I would take a look at all of these. Like I said, always use more than one resource. There's also some helpful articles, on salary negotiation. There's a lot of tips out there. There's a lot of helpful information. So there's no shortage of it. But I hope that this conversation or this presentation is a good place for all of you to start, and to start thinking more about what you might have already done, what you still need to do in regards to salary negotiation, and just again getting that practice, or things that you might do differently the next time. Some of you out there might have already been through this process and are thinking to yourself, oh, if I had just done this, or learned something about what a peer or someone else did that really opened your eyes to the process.